Hello my friends, and welcome to the brand new series of Neo-Khuzdul lessons. I am the Dwarrow Scholar, and these lessons are one element in my research into the dwarves of Professor Tolkien's Middle-earth. You can find much more concerning the dwarves on my blog, which is dwarrowscholar.mymiddleearth.com, link in the lesson notes. I know some of you have waited a very long time for this, and thus it's with tremendous joy that I'm finally able to introduce these new lessons to you all. Before we dive into the first lesson, let's have a closer look at what Khuzdul in fact is. Now, Khuzdul, the language of the dwarves of Middle-earth, is a secret language spoken among dwarves and rarely spoken to non-dwarves. Hence, not to be spoken to not-dwarves. Now, how is this Neo-Khuzdul different from the Khuzdul of Professor Tolkien? Well, if we were to create lessons based on the original Khuzdul of Professor Tolkien, it would likely be a extremely short lesson, as there's simply not enough material to form even the most simple sentences. Apart from the legendary battle cry voiced by Gimli in The Lord of the Rings, which is Baruk Khazad Khazad Aimenu, translated as Axis of the dwarves are upon you, we have about a page worth of words, mainly derived from Khuzdul place names. My own curiosity, interest in dwarves of Tolkien, and fondness of languages has drawn me to expand the language made by Professor Tolkien, to make it into a language usable in everyday conversation, or at the very least for role players to use it if they wish to enjoy role-playing dwarves, to have a language available for them. Professor Tolkien's original material and Basics on Semitic Languages, also Neo-Khuzdul of linguist David Salo, the linguist responsible for Neo-Khuzdul in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies, and the Neo-Khuzdul scene in Lord of the Rings Online have all been used to create this Neo-Khuzdul version. So a grand thank you to all that have contributed in some way to the corpus of Neo-Khuzdul. Now, anyone that wishes to know more about the history and form of my Neo-Khuzdul version is very welcome to read all about it on my blog, and there's a link in the lesson notes. Now, time we jump into our first lesson here, wouldn't you agree? So this is actually the first in a series of 24 lessons. So 24 lessons which have been conveniently divided in 3 grades of 8 lessons each. There's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced grade. Now each 8 lesson grade is divided again in 2 levels, 4 basic lessons and 4 slightly more advanced lessons. As for your convenience, and to be sure all sinks in at a somewhat digestible pace, we'll have a little review lesson once we've completed each 4 lesson level. Which makes, if we count the review lessons as well, a complete lesson pack of 32 lessons. And the good thing is, it's completely free. So revisit the site regularly, and you'll see a new lesson pop up every now and then. So, Khuzdul, let's take a closer look, shall we? So, Professor Tolkien created Khuzdul as a Semitic language, meaning it's similar in structure to modern-day languages such as Hebrew or Arabic, or in Middle-earth terms, the language of Adunaic, spoken in Numenor, which we learn was influenced by Khuzdul for some parts as well. But I digress. So, a Semitic language structure, what does that mean exactly? It means that the form words take, where consonants and where vowels are placed within the word, or what is placed before or after these letters, is vital, and it tells us all we need to know about the word. Now let me show you what I mean with an example. Let's take the following Khuzdul words for instance. Bark, axe. Barku, axe of. Barak, axes. Baruk, axes of. Abrak, cleaving. Berak, hatchet. Birkin, axe place, or armory where axes are kept. Ubrak, cleaver. Ibrek, the act of cleaving. Now, if you look at all of these, notice anything particular about these words? Yes, they all contain the consonants B, R, K, and always in that order. So any Khuzdul word that has the consonants combination B, R, K is in some way related to the concept of axe or axes. Another example in the same style. Kamt, note. Kamtu, note of. Kamat, notes. Kamut, notes of. Akmat, song. Kemat, song voice. Kimteen, song place. Ukmat, singer. Ikmet, the act of singing. So here we see the consonants or the consonant combination KMTH. Now note that TH is in fact seen as one consonant, as it is an extended T or voiced T. So a fancy way of saying that we add a breathy H. So instead of saying T or true T, it becomes T. So instead of T, it's T. So in Semitic languages, such as Khuzdul, we call consonants that are the basic building blocks for the words radicals. So now if we compare the above examples, we see the same pattern returning. Now let's replace, of these two examples, all radicals and put a C for consonants in the place. And let's see what we get. Well, as you've no doubt noticed now, we see the exact same pattern in both examples. Now these patterns in fact tell us what the exact meaning of the word will be. For instance, abrak is cleaving, while akmat is song. Both abstract concepts take the pattern A, C, C, extended A, C. So you see that abrak takes this pattern, akmat takes this pattern. Other concepts as well that have an abstract concept or that are an abstract concept will get the same. Let me give you another example. If we know that the radical pattern GLB is used for things related to language. Now, what do you think would the word language be? Language, again, an abstract concept. What would that be? If we know the form is A, consonant, consonant, extended A, consonant. And we know that the radical pattern of language is GLB. Exactly, aglab. Aglab is language. So we see that there's a pattern to words in Khuzdul, which is very typical for Semitic languages. So the radicals GLB are filled into this pattern to give us the word we need. Now, another example, shall we? The words kemat, song voice, and berak, hatchet. They use the pattern consonant, E, consonant, A, consonant. So radical E, radical A, radical. A pattern usually reserved for utilities and tools, which makes sense. A song voice is the tool used for singing, while a hatchet is the tool used for cleaving wood. So if we know that the radicals F, L, K are used for those words related to the concept of hewing. Now, what do you think a hewer or a hewing tool would be? Exactly, felak. So what does this mean? What does all of this mean practically? It means that if we understand and know the patterns and we remember the radicals of each concept, we have the building blocks we need to build all kinds of words. Now, in our lessons, we'll look at all the patterns and see all kinds of radical combinations at a very gentle pace, in the form of a variety of scenes in which dwarves go about their everyday lives. Now, today's scene takes us to the library with 3 dwarven girls. In today's lesson, we'll take a look at a selection of dwarven alphabet, get acquainted with our first verbs, and introduce one of the most common verb tenses, the perfect tense. So, let's visit the library, where I believe Master Gambly is just about ready to welcome one of his guests.
Shamuk, Mukbu Janada, Itmi Ubhar, Akrame Gamil Zigiltark, Umrazu Mazarbu, Zaya Chanzi.
Disi, Girinul, Zai ad Shanzu Rabarafsu, Ubha nunu agzatanakian. Uksu iski. Sulufahani gamil Allah.
Isdun gamil, na gamalon iglukul, kazad et haru fahanonyadi, azulu fahani alanekon kazadum.
Bin razmul. Bazarsu yadi sigin zirak gamli.
Baharmi higbushu, fahanmi sigim, ragasharmi et haru. Ini ne mazarmi yadi, natuna dizi.
Yom naradatari kidu. Kalatmi izni.
Nara bazlinul, ranane tari, zayat shanzu, karazmi ese tadademsu eranane.
Kamil zikl tark, saya chanzi rabaravsi. Dembi hiktuzu kazdit kurutapur.
Kun adama galuba ma tara dasarsu hu katu hu kazdi. Kajama ma fahani gamil. Gluba ma tara bahara. Higbrushu ya iznu.
Nada de bakama fahani narkama eni minrin.
Hu kasat aarak babak. Kajammi fahani et haru dubhar.
Amade gulubai hu ala. Ini mahabara dia. Akmin ruki astu zirak gamli.
Kamansi e yaniksi. Ini arnaki nadadzi bakama fahani huhut.
Bakama fahani huhut?
Ma saksham yanzut. Ma besedmi fahani aerabanyom.
Nane tadanai, igrutul kama magashurul ala zirak gamli.
Ni ma karmu ganar mi da nezarami tabi.
Da ne zarabmi tabia.
Kasharmi dazrup et haru rasulu makhahoan hudubu.
Na nakatma izare magashu tabe.
Banal mabak. Galik. Nara makhahai izreb sunchfalal. Radisit janadai fahanidia.
Bizru galik, magashru magununa.
So that was our very first lesson. Let us dive into each line in a bit more detail, shall we? Note though, I will not be going into full detail on every single word. The reason for this is that we'll be focusing on specifics, and surely we'll be having a closer look at words that might not be very important to this lesson, but that we will see in future lessons. Right, our first line, Master Gumli, if you please.
Shamuk. Mukbu janada. Itmi ubhar. Akrame gamil zigil tark. Umrazu mazarbu zaya chanzi.
Before we dissect some of these words, there is one type of word I wish to focus on for this lesson. As mentioned, we would be introducing the most common verb tense, the perfect tense, and in our opening line, we already get our first taste of the perfect tense in the form of the word janada. Now, hold on. What is this perfect tense I keep talking about? In Khuzdul, there are two primary tenses, the perfect tense and the imperfect tense. Now, in Semitic languages, these usually refer to the past and present tense. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Neo-Khuzdul. It's not as simple, as the perfect tense refers to the dependable facts, facts that are not evolving and are certain realities, while the imperfect tense, as you might expect, refers to the facts that are questionable, that are evolving or uncertain. So our first lesson will look at the perfect tense. So there's a closer look at the main forms in the perfect tense. So as I said, in the first line, we notice a prime example of the perfect tense, janada. Master Gimli says, Shamuk mukbu janada, which can be translated as greetings, the library has opened, or the library is open. We know the library is open. It's a dependable fact. There's no doubt about it. So Master Gimli uses the perfect tense, which is used for such dependable, reliable facts. Using the verb to open as an example, let's have a look at how we conjugate in the perfect tense. So as you can see, the perfect tense uses a base form. In this case, the base form is janad, and we add a conjugation to it at the end that indicates who is doing the action. One remarkable thing about Khuzdul, or any Semitic language for that matter, is the fact that you don't see the personal form. So there's no I, he, she, we, they in the conjugated form. So these words do exist separately, but when we use them in combination with a conjugated verb form, they are omitted because it's evident, as the conjugation basically clearly states to whom this applies. Now let us quickly review Janad open in the perfect tense. For convenience, I will be translating it as it were the past tense, because that's the most frequently used form for the perfect. As I said, perfect shouldn't divide perfect and imperfect based on past and present, because it is based on dependability. So if things are dependable, we use this form, which is the perfect. If they're not, if they're evolving or independable or uncertain, we use the imperfect, which is another form that we'll see in future lessons. Now, for convenience, I will be using the past tense, which is the most frequent form used with the perfect. Janad mi, I have opened. Janad su, you, male, have opened. Janad si, you, female, have opened. Janada, he, it, has opened. Janadai, she has opened. Janadma, we have opened. Janadsun, you, masculine, plural, have opened. Janadsin, you, plural, female, have opened. Janadon, they, masculine, have opened. Janaden, they, female, have opened. So what is it that we see here? I open or have opened. Again, we shouldn't focus on past and present, but on dependability. So I open, Janad me. Perhaps an easy one to remember, as it resembles the English me. So me as the first form suffix, so thing that you add at the end, that's a suffix for the perfect tense. You open, when we talk about you in Khuzdul, we need to be very clear if the you we are referring to is singular or plural, or if it's male or female, because all of these have different forms. As for each of these types of you, as I said, there's a different form. So if we're talking to one male, we add su to the base. In case of female, we add si to the base. You, the male open, would thus be janatsu. The female singular version would thus be janatsi. In case we are talking about more than one person, hence the plural form, we simply add an n to the singular version, creating janatsun for the male plural and janatsin for the female plural. So what do we do if we have a group of people we are addressing, and some of them are female and others of them are male? Well, the answer is we use the male form. The rule here is from the moment that there's one male in the group, even if he's outnumbered 1,000 to 1, you use the male form, meaning that janatsin is only used when addressing more than one female with no males in the group. Right, moving on to the third person form. He and it have the same form in Khuzdul. We add a to the base, forming janada. If we want to make the female version of this third person, in other words, she opens or she has opened, we add I to the base, forming janadai. Making the plural third person, the male version of they becomes janadon, while the female version becomes janaden, adding on and ein respectively. Here as well, if one of them is male, we use the male form, even if all others of the group are female. Right, that will do nicely for a brief overview of the perfect tense for now. Let's keep that on our work area as we go through the lines, as I have a feeling we'll likely be needing that later. Let's have another listen to that first line.
Shamuk, mukbu janada, itmi ubhar, akrame gamil zigil tark, umrazu mazarbu zaya chanzi.
Shamuk, used as a common greeting and goodbye. Mukbu janada, the library, mukbu, it has opened, literally. Janada consists of, as we've seen, the base janad, and we add a at the end to indicate it is it. So it has opened. Janad janada. Itmi Ubhar means welcome students. Welcome is an imperative form, something that we won't focus on in this lesson. Ubhar is the plural of Ubhar, meaning the student. So that means that instead of Ubhar student, we get Ubhar, which is students. So it has an extended A. Then there is Akrame, consists of Akram, name, and A, which is my. So again, we'll see that we'll see the personal possessive forms in future lessons. So moving on. Gamli Zigiltark, Gamli being his first name, an outer name, as is common among the dwarves, while Zigiltark, meaning Silverbeard, is his epithet, the name he has earned and is known with. This is unlike a family name, as dwarves as such do not have such names. More on naming conventions of dwarves in the show notes. There's an article on it on my blog. Next segment of this line is Amrazu Mazarbul. Amraz meaning keeper, U in the end indicating of, so keeper of. We've briefly seen this form earlier when we discussed Ubrak, Baruk, and Barku. In simple terms, this is a possessive form, adding a U at the end, or U at the end, of a noun turns the form into a genitive form, that is for the singular. So instead of bark, which is axe, if we want to make that into acts of, we would set a U at the end of it, creating barku. So umrazu is keeper of. Umraz plus U. Mazarbul. Now, I'm sure many know this word as it is a famed word. It's used in the chamber of Mazarbul, commonly translated as the chamber of records. Now, Mazarbul uses the radicals Z, R, B, used for concepts related to writing. So this construction literally means that which is written, which is a good description basically of records. So literally, Umrazu Mazarbul means keeper of that which is written. And finally, Zai Atshanzi, Zai meaning at, Atshan meaning service, and Z is the female possessive version of your. So at your service, in this case, directed at a female. Otherwise, it would be Atshanzu, which we'll see in a minute.
Disi, Girinul, Zai Adshanzu Rabarafzu. Ubha Nunu Agzatanakian. Uksu, Iski, Sulufahani Gamil Allah.
So we see that Disi introduces herself in the usual very polite form to Master Gamli. First, she gives us her name and her lineage, telling Master Gamli she is the daughter of Girin. Incidentally, the name Ul form means daughter of, or perhaps more commonly heard of, son of. So, Zai Atshanzu Rabarafsu. Let's look at that first bit first. Zai Atshanzu. In the previous line, spoken by Master Gamli, we heard Zai Atshanzi, which meant at your service. Z being the female possessive version of your. As DC is addressing a male in the form of our kind Master Gamli, she must use the male possessive form, which is Zu. The same applies for Baraf Zu. Baraf being family, so your family. In case Gamli would say this to DC, it would become Zai Barafsi, as he would be addressing a female. Ubhar Nunur being other students. We saw Ubhar earlier, which is students, which leaves Nunur being other. Now we notice a particularity of Khuzdul, or Semitic languages as a whole, which is that the noun is placed before the adjective instead of after it. To clarify, in Khuzdul we would say a dog black instead of a black dog. Now, moving on. Ag Zatanakian, meaning will arrive soon. A form we'll look more closely at in future lessons. Uksu, freely translated as wow, an interjection. Iski, the imperative form of see, something we won't be focusing on in this lesson. Sulu Fahani Gamil Allah, all these old books. Literally, all books old these. As mentioned, we swapped the place of adjectives and nouns, hence Fahani Gamil and not Gamil Fahani.
Isdun Gamil, na Gamalon Iglukul, Kazad et Haru Fahanonyadi, Azulu Fahani, Alanekon Kazadum.
They are old, yet they have aged well. Many dwarves have studied here. Some of these books came from Khazad-dûm. We see Gamil appear here once more. So Gamil, in this case, they are old, translates as Isdun Gamil. Literally, they old. Notice that there is no conjugation of the verb to be. In fact, it is not even mentioned. This is very common in Khuzdul, where the verb to be as such does not exist. So when we form sentences with to be, for instance, I am happy, you would say I happy, simply omitting the form altogether. Now, Gamalon Iglukul. Let's look at Gamalon. Does that look familiar? It should, as it's a perfect tense. The base is Gamal, and we add on to indicate we are talking about the third person plural. So they, to be specific, the third person male masculine. We use the masculine form as we are talking about books. So it, or the plural form of it, as mentioned when we were discussing the perfect form. It and he share a form in the singular. There is no difference in the plural. If we were talking about one book, it would be Gamala. He or it ages. Another point to keep your eye on are the radicals in this word. Gamalon. If we drop the conjugation, we are left with Gamal, giving us the radicals GML. Previously, we saw another word with those radicals, Gamil, which was old. Remember, Fahani Gamil, the old books. So you see, when we talk about the same concept, to age, or old, in this case, the words will use the same radicals. There are a few other examples of this in our scene. We'll cover them later. As mentioned, I won't go into detail on every single line, as most of this will be covered in future lessons. Now let's try to focus on the essence of the lesson, which is the perfect form. The last line has another perfect form in it, which is nekhon. Another form with on, meaning they, masculine, logical, as we are still talking about those books. The base being nek and adding on. This is the first base form we'll see that isn't in the usual radical form, like Jannat or Gamal. Nor does it have three radicals, it has two of them. For the time being, it suffices that you know that these base forms can have two or three radicals, like most Khuzdul words. And in the perfect can either have A, E, or U vowels. For this lesson, we'll focus on the most frequent form, those with three radicals and A vowels, like Janad, Gamal.
Bin Razmul. Bazarsu yadi sigin zirak gamli.
Unbelievable. Have you worked here long, Master Gamli? Talking about a three radical A vowel, perfect tense form, there is one in this line, Mazarsu. MZR being the radicals related to work. Mazar su. Su, we've seen, is the second person singular masculine form. You for one male specifically. So DC here is addressing Master Gamli. So you in this case, but the male form. So this makes sense. She is talking to a male. Now this is a question. So why does DC use the dependable perfect tense here? In most cases, we would not use the perfect tense for questions. The fact that it is a question disqualifies it from being dependable, and hence normally would use the imperfect. So we're not using the imperfect, we're using the perfect tense. So in this case, however, DC is using the perfect tense as she is implying that she is convinced that Gamli has worked here long. Another way of translating this would be, I'm certain you've worked here long, haven't you, Master Gamli? So as you can see, it is not impossible to use the perfect tense for questions, though it is very rare. The title Zirak might sound familiar. Gamil Zirak, or Old Master, was the name of the teacher of Telkar, likely the greatest dwarven smith of all time. And there is also Zirak Zigil, one of the 3 peaks of Khazad-dûm. Zirak literally means spike. It can also mean master or one of higher rank. In this case, Zirak Zigil, we are talking about the peak of a mountain, it will mean high. While in the case of Gamil Zirak, we mean the person itself who is of high rank or high renown. Hence, using the title Zirak is a very polite and respectful title to offer to someone. Now, why is Old Master Gamil Zirak and not Zirak Gamil? As you might recall, I mentioned earlier that in Khuzdul we swap adjectives and nouns. So old dog would become dog old, remember? So why was the teacher of Telkar named Gamil Zirak? Why was he not named Zirak Gamil? Reason for this is that Gamil Zirak is the name he is known by. Often we'll see this happen when an adjective is part of a name or a title. Other examples are Sigin Tarag, which is long beards. Sigin being long. Right, moving on.
Baharmi higbushu, fahmi sigim, ragasharmi etharu. Ini ne mazarmi yadi, natu nadizi.
I have learned much, I have studied long and taught many, but I have never worked here, Maiden DC. This line is knee-deep in perfect tenses. Let's have a look. Baharmi, fahanmi, gasharmi, mazarmi. You'll notice that the conjugation of these forms is identical. Master Gamli is talking about himself and his own experiences, so using the first person singular. I have learned, I have studied, I taught, I never worked. Hence, we add me to the perfect base. You'll notice as well that the radicals used for the verb to study and those of the word books are the same, being FHN. Books we saw earlier was fahani. If I were to say I study books, what result would you think I would get? Correct. Fahanmi fahani. A few other words worth mentioning here, or we'll bump into them from time to time, are etharul, simply translated as many. And then there is yadi. As we've seen in the previous line as well, yadi means here.
Yom narada tari kidu, kalatmi izni.
There are Nara and Tari now. I've heard them. And there is Yom, as seen in this line. Another frequent word we'll see pop up every now and then is Ra. It is the Khuzdul for and. Kalatmi izni, another perfect form, consisting of kalat plus me, and that me being, of course, the first person singular. Then now izni looks very familiar to a word we saw earlier being izdun in one of the previous lines. In that line, izdun gamil was explained as being they are old. In this example, kalatmi izni means I have heard them. So izni is them, the female version to be exact. Note that we'll frequently use I to indicate female versions, while we use U to indicate male versions. So even if we have never met, which is the case, we've never met Nara and Tari, we know that they are females. As DC said, Kalatmi izni, and not Kalatmi iznu, which she would have used in case either Nara or Tari, or perhaps both, were male.
Nara bazlinul, ranane tari, zayat shanzu, karazmi ese, tadademsu eranane.
Nara, daughter of Baslin, and my sister Tari at your service. I pride myself that you have welcomed me and my sister. Another very polite introduction, in addition to another perfect tense form, karazmi. I take pride. once more the first person singular form. There is another perfect tense in this second line. Can you spot it? Yes, it is demsu. You might recall Master Gimli welcoming Disi at the start of our first scene with the word idmi. If we remove the vowels of this word, we get the radicals being dm. So idmi, dem, su being the conjugation obviously. Radicals we find in the word doom, as in khazad-dûm, meaning halls and mansions. Idmi, we saw earlier, means welcome. It is clear that the dwarves associate their halls with the act of welcoming, as otherwise it would not use the same radicals. How hospitable of them. The conjugated word demsu means you have welcomed, you welcome, a perfect form, the base dem, plus the conjugation su being the masculine version of you, singular version. That is, as Nara is addressing Master Gimli, who happens to be male, obviously.
Kamil Tark, saya chanzi rabaravsi. Dembi hiktuzu kazdit kurutapur.
Gimli Silverbeard, at your service and your families. I have ever welcomed the young dwarves, eager to learn. This is a variation of an introduction we've seen earlier. Note again that the E at the end stands for the female version, so E at the end of Achanzi and Baravsi, as Master Gimli is addressing a female. Here we see the perfect form dem return, this time with the first person singular form me, making it demmi. I have welcomed, I welcome.
Kun adatma galuba ma tara gasarsu hu katu hu kazdith. Kajama ma fahani gamil. Gluba ma tara bahara. Higbrushu ya iznu.
Yes, our father spoke to us that you taught him when he was a young dwarf. He gave us his old books. He spoke to us that he learned much with them. Adatma, we've seen similar words, nane and akrame. How are these similar? Well, they use personal pronouns. Our, your, my, etc. Adatma is our father. Nane is my sister. Akrame is my name. So you'll notice that in Khuzdul, we merge the personal pronoun and the noun into one word. So my father, my sister, my name, all of that is one word in Khuzdul. The personal pronoun in these examples, ma, which is our, and e, which is my, are always placed at the end. But more on these pronouns and other personal forms in future lessons. Let's look at the perfect forms in this line. Can you spot them? Guluba, he spoke. Gasharsu, you taught. Gajama, he gave. Bahara, he learned. In Gasharsu, we see again the male form of the conjugation return, being su, as opposed to the female second person singular, which is si. The other perfect tense form used in this line are all third person masculine. As you can see, they take the base form and we add ah. And the last line, Guluba ma tada bahara higbushul ya iznu. Firstly, the second word in this line, ma, might seem familiar, as in adat ma. We just saw adat ma, which is our father. Ma as a separate word, however, means us. So if you join it with the noun, as in adat ma, it means our father. If you put it separately, it would mean us instead of our. So Guluba ma means he spoke to us. Earlier we saw kalatmi izni, meaning I heard them. You might recall I said that izni is the female version of them, while iznu is the male version of them. So yeah, iznu means with them, being the male version, or at least one of that group is male.
Nada de bakama fahani narkama eni minrin.
My brother has bought new books for me at the marketplace. Again, we see the a suffix added to the word nadat. Nadat being brother, nadade indicates my brother. Bakama is another fine example of the perfect tense. We see the base form, which is bakam, and we add a to indicate that it's he or it that is performing the action. You'll also notice that there's an a mentioned separately in this line. If we know that ma attached to the end of a word means our, and ma separately means us, or ma separately means us, then we can draw an easy parallel, being a attached to a word means my, while e separately with a shortened vowel this time means me. So fahani nar is another prime example of the Khuzdul noun adjective word order. Books new, it means literally. Ni is a word used for at or into or in, so ni. The word for market is manar. If we wish to say marketplace, it becomes minrin. Notice that, as always, the radicals in this case, m and r, do not change. In is a common suffix used for note location, but more on that in future lessons.
Hu kasat a'arak babak. Kajammi fahani etaru dupar.
There was no need. I have given many books to students. If we were to translate the first part of this line, literally we would get it was need no. Who is the word used for it or he? Now, I mentioned earlier that Khuzdul does in effect not have the verb to be when used in perfect form. For instance, we are dwarves would simply be ma kazad, we dwarves. But what if you wanted to talk about something that was? In that case, we would use the irregular verb kasat, which in fact is a variation of the verb to exist. Almost like saying there existed no need. More on this irregular verb kasat later, but just keep in mind that there is a way to form the verb to be in Khuzdul, yet only when we speak of occurrences in the past. This is the second time we run into the word etaru. It means many or plenty.
Amade gulubai hu ala. Ini mahabara dia. Akmin ruki astu zirak gamli.
My mother told him this, but he did not listen to her. I thank you wholeheartedly, Master Gamli. Now, we see that in previous lines, the perfect tense base, gulub, if you can recall, it means speak. In this example, mother speaks. We must add the third person feminine form, which is I, making it gulubai. There is yet another perfect tense in this line. Perhaps you can spot it. Yes, it's habara. He listened. Perfect tense space habar plus a to indicate we are talking about he, or in some cases it. Now the line translates as he did not listen. The not is in fact the ma placed before the conjugated verb. Do not confuse this with ma, with the ma we saw earlier, used as us or our. One is a short vowel ma, meaning not, placed before the conjugated verb, while the other is ma, meaning we, added at the end of the noun, or us added after the conjugated verb. The last line, akmin rukiastu, is an extremely polite way of saying thank you. We'll have a closer look at this form in future lessons.
Kamansi e yaniksi. Ini arnaki nadadzi bakama fahani hu.
You have thanked me by your arrival, but I think your brother bought the wrong books. We will, however, take a look at a verb related to thank, which is in the perfect tense, and it has the base kaman. If we compare that to our previous line, akmin ruki, we do see, which is to be exact, the same radicals, k, m, n, so k, a with a h, m, and n, return. Let's take a closer look at this line though, kamansi e Ianixi, which is you have thanked me by your arrival. Kamansi is the perfect base kaman with added si to indicate you, and to be more exact, the singular female version of you. So we get you have thanked or you thank. Means me, as we've seen before, making you have thanked me. Ya is with or by, which we saw in previous line, the form yah is nu, with them. Now, nixi is your arrival. How so? Well, nik means arrival. By adding zu or z at the end of the word, we turn it into your arrival, talking to a male or a female respectively. In this case, Gimli is addressing a female, so we will add z, making it nixi. We see the same in the word nadadzi, where nadad is brother and z is added to indicate you, but then the female version. Lastly, fahani, which we know by now means books, has an adjective huhut, meaning wrong or incorrect, added after it in the usual Khuzdul fashion.
Bakama fahani huhut?
He bought the wrong books. Here Tari repeats what Gimli has spoken before. Yet there is something that we should look at in this line, and that's the use of the perfect tense. Bakama means he bought or he buys. As it's in the perfect tense, it means it is dependable fact, no doubt about it. Yet Tari asks it as a question. So how so? Well, Gimli stated it and used the perfect, and if Tari now would repeat the statement, just yet use the imperfect, she would in fact be doubting the earlier statement of Gimli, which could in fact be considered a form of an insult, to doubt a dependable fact stated by an elder. So it's clear why Tari here uses the perfect form. She wants to stay polite and repeats Master Gimli's statement. Our question here, of course, is why did Master Gimli use the perfect tense, as if he was sure Disi's brother bought the wrong books, while earlier he says he thinks her brother bought the wrong books. Well, this is an example of being sure about something yet trying to remain polite by using the verb to think, as using bakama fahani huhut could be considered as a bit direct, meaning he bought the wrong books. Hence, Gimli uses I think, which is arniki, which is the imperfect tense, which we'll see in the future lesson, to indicate there is some doubt, and by doing so, remaining polite. So it's a combination, if you will, of using the imperfect tense and the perfect tense in the same line.
Ma saksham yanzud. Ma besedmi fahani yairabanyom.
You should not worry, I have placed the correct books on the table there. Placing ma in front of a conjugated verb means we are in fact using a negation, which seems to be the case if we look at the translation here. You should not worry. The other verb forms mentioned here are a bit advanced for now, so we'll skip these, but I would like to look at fahani airabanyom. Fahani we've seen a few times already, meaning books. Yom we've seen as well in an earlier line, meaning there. Now what's airaban? You might recall the famous Khuzdul battle cry, Baruch Hazad Khazad Aimenu. Aimenu meaning upon you. We won't focus on the plural form of you in this lesson, yet we see the same I as in Aimenu returning here in Ayraban. Raban is the word used for table. So Ayraban means upon the table. I is a shortened form of aya, and that is shortened when it merges with a noun. Not going into too much technical details on that in this lesson, as it's for another lesson, but just so you know that when you see I in front of a noun, it usually means upon or on.
Nane tadanai igrutul kama magashurul ala zirak Gimli.
My sister has waited eagerly for this class, Master Gimli. Now, in this next line, there are two things to look at. Yes, we've got a perfect form listed here again, tadanai, the perfect tense being tadan, while adding the third person female form, I. She has waited, or she waits. The second thing I want to quickly have a look at is the word magashurul. The structure of it might seem familiar with a word we saw at the start of the lesson, being mazarbul. Mazarbul meaning that which is written or records using the radicals MZR. The radicals used in the word magashurul are G, Sh, R. We've seen this before, if you can recall. Earlier in the lesson, Gimli says Gasharmi etarur, meaning I have taught many. If you know that mazarbul means that which is written, and G, Sh, R is used for concepts related to teaching, then what do you think magashurul means? Magashrul means that which is taught, so basically a lesson.
Ni ma karmu ganar mi da nezarami tabi.
Indeed I had, though I have never written before. Nimar Kharbul is indeed. It confirms what is said. I had in the perfect form is seen here as well. Ganar is as the base, and we add mi for the first person as we've seen before. So that is Ganar mi. I have. More on to have and to be in future lessons though, as they are somewhat a special irregular variation of verbs, only used when referring to events in the past. Da ne zarab mi tabi. Zarab mi, look at the radicals of this word. Even if you don't have the translation written below, you should be clear what this word means simply by looking at the radicals. These are Z-R-B. Indeed, those are the same radicals used in the word mazarbul, which we saw means that which is written, meaning that ZRB is used to convey concepts related to writing. Zarabmi means I have written, I write.
Da ne zarabmi tabiya.
I also have never written before. And here we see Nara repeating the same statement as she in fact is also or has also never written before. I have taught many to write and all have found it easy. Focusing on the perfect tense verbs and conjugations once more, we notice two of them in this line. Gasharmi, which is base gashar, which we saw earlier, and mi, to indicate the first person singular. Gasharmi means I have taught or I teach. Notice, I generally say both past and present tense, while in most cases the translation uses the past tense. Reason for this is that both the perfect and imperfect tense could convey either time tenses. So, as mentioned at the start of the lesson, the perfect tense is used for dependable facts, so not necessarily facts that happened in the past. Though these usually do happen in the past, they might as well happen in future. For instance, the sun will rise. That is a dependable fact that will happen in future. For convenience, though, as most events described by the perfect do in fact happen in the past, they are usually translated by the English past tense. Makahon, another conjugated perfect tense. On being the third person plural masculine form. They, the men, founded. Earlier we saw who being used for he or it. Now we see who with an extended vowel. This is in fact the accusative form used for him or it. But again, more on that in future lessons.
Na nakatma izare magashu tabe.
We have never attended a writing lesson before. Nikhabma is a bit of a special case, as it uses what is called an allied verb. To put it in simple terms, it consists of the parts nek, ab, and ma. The ab added to the base, which is nek, gives a slightly different meaning to the verb, changing the original meaning of come to arrive. Like comparing the English verb reach and reach out, or jump and jump over. So this is just a perfect tense form, be it with a little addition. More on allied verbs in future lessons. Now, there's another extremely long word in this line, which is izreb magashrul. Magashrul we saw earlier, which means lesson, or that which is taught. If we look at the other part, izreb, we see the radicals z, r, b returning. So this has something to do with writing. In fact, the form izreb means the act of writing. So literally, izreb magashrul means the act of writing that which is taught. In simple terms, a writing lesson. This merging of two words is not unusual in Khuzdul, and it is called a compound.
Bana mabak, galik, nara makahai izreb sunchfalal, radisid janadai fahanidia.
No problem. Good. Nara has found the writing quills, and DC has opened her books. Bana mabak. Now, mabak means zero or nothing, and it is frequently used to negate nouns. Banal means problem. So, banal mabak is problem nothing or no problem. Remember, we switch adjectives and nouns in Khuzdul. Earlier we saw makahon, they found. Now we see makahai, I being the form added for she. So she has found. As we are talking about Nara, so a female. At the start of the lesson we heard Mukbu Janada. The library has opened. Janada being the base Janad plus A, which is used for he or it. As in our previous perfect tense, we must add I here as Gamli is talking about DC. Hence, she has opened, which is Janadai. The last word in this line is Fahanidia. Now, Fahani we know by now, which is books. We add dia to indicate we are talking about her books, making it Fahanidia.
Bizru galik, magashru magununa.
Wonderful. The lesson has started. Bizrul galik. Wonderful. Literally meaning deeply good. Mahgununa is another perfect tense form, using another one of those allied verbs. This time mah is placed in front. If you take away the mah in front of it for a moment, you'll see it is just your everyday perfect tense form with ah in the end, meaning it talks about he or it, which is the case clearly here as it talks about the lesson, which is it. That is it for our review of today's lesson, today's scene. It has been quite the review. Now, do take into account, though I've skipped much on purpose in this lesson, the idea is that we'll see loads of the concepts we've briefly touched upon in future lessons. This way, the learning curve isn't too steep, and you'll be able to understand and speak a bit of Neo-Khuzdul before you know it. Now, the last thing we will do in this lesson, before we call it a day, is look at the Khuzdul alphabet. No doubt you've noticed by now that I have not included any runes in the translation of today's scene. The reason for this is that we will gradually introduce more and more runes as the lessons progress, ensuring we learn not only to understand and speak Neo-Khuzdul, but also to write it. We'll cover the entire Khuzdul alphabet in the first 4 lessons. So today we'll be seeing the first part of the alphabet. I'll be illustrating each letter by using words seen in this lesson. First thing to know here is that there are 2 main Khuzdul alphabets, the Moria style, Angerthas Moria, or Kartu Khazadun, and the Erebor style, Angerthas Erebor or Kartu Urt. In these lessons, we'll be focusing exclusively on Kartu Urt, or Erebor style runes, as by the end of the Third Age in the West, it was by far the most popular form used for everyday writing by the Dwarves. There are 32 standalone runes in the Khuzdul alphabet, 28 if we don't count the extended version of the vowels, in addition to a handful of punctuation marks, obsolete runes, and combination runes, who aren't considered part of the alphabet. So today we'll see the first 8 runes in Kartu Urt, or as the elves call it, Angerthas Moria. The glottal stop, a challenging one to start with perhaps. The glottal stop is a sound rarely seen in English, and one most languages don't support as such. It is the sound you make when you cut off the air in your throat. An example in English is the sound made in between the expression uh-oh. Think of it like holding your breath, but not with your lips, with your throat. The sound you make when releasing that breath, when you relax your throat muscles again, is the glottal stop. An example of the glottal stop we've seen in this lesson is Adatma, our father. Adat, father. An, the short the as in father. Not much different than the English pronunciation would be. An example of this sound is all over our scene, as it's one of the most common sounds in Khuzdul. Let's pick an example we've seen. Ya, meaning with or by or also. Siginan, this is the longer brother of the sound we've just seen. It's called Sigin An, which means long un or long a. An example from our scene today is ma, meaning us. Notice that in order to form the rune for siginan, we use the same rune as for un, but place an additional diagonal line underneath the already written mid-diagonal line. Batu, b. Exactly the same sound as in English, for instance in the word bean. An example from our scene today is barafsu, your family, or baraf, family. Datu, d. The same as in English again, and a good example would be da, do. N, e. The sound found in the English word bed. An example would be e, which means me. Siginen, e. A longer brother of the previous vowel. An example from our scene today is e taru, meaning many. Notice, like with siginan, in the rune we see the same rune as n, but place an additional diagonal line beneath the already written mid-diagonal line. This way we indicate that it is an extended vowel. Fam, f. The same as seen in English. An example is fahani, books, or fahani, book. Well, that will do nicely for our alphabet overview for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at the next 8 runes. Now, to wrap up our lesson for today, let's have a super quick review of some of the concepts and words we've seen in today's lesson. The perfect form. When to use it? Well, when facts are dependable. How to use it? We take the base form, add the conjugation depending on the personal form, or depending on the person performing the action. Concepts. Akrame, my name. Akram, name. Zai achanzi, or zai achanzu, at your service, being set to a female or either set to a male. Fahani gamil, old books. Remember, we switch the place of the noun with the adjectives. And lastly, a quick recap of some of the radical structures we've seen today. ZRB, writing. Mazarbu, that which is written. Izreep, the act of writing. Zarabmi, I have written. Gshr, teaching. Magashrul, that which is taught or lesson. Gasharmi, I have taught. Gml, aging. Gamil, old. Gamalon, they have aged. Studying. Fahani, book. Fahani, books. Fahanmi, I have studied. Mansion, welcome. Doom, mansion. Idmi, welcome. Demsu, you have welcomed. That concludes our long-awaited and quite extensive first lesson. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I advise everyone to have a look at the Dwarrow Scholar website on dwarrowscholar.mymiddleearth.com, where you'll find dozens of support documents and 2 very large dictionaries that will allow you to review some of the content at your own pace. Links to these in the show notes. I would also like to thank everyone that has been so generous to donate on the Dwarrow Scholar blog. Your donations make all of this free content possible. Any donations are welcomed, obviously, as they will enable me to invest in these video lessons, the support documents, and many other Dwarven-related projects, making them even better and keeping them free for all. Again, my thanks to all those that have donated. A tremendous thank you also to Rokna, Amli, and Simone, who provided the female voices heard in our scene today. We'll be hearing more from them in future lessons. Also, feel free to leave a comment on this YouTube page or the blog, and make sure to follow on Twitter, which is at kstrongbeard, for any updates. Drop me an email at kstrongbeard@aol.com in case you have any questions or comments. Thank you all, and Shamuk.